Hello again, whiskey friends. Hey, thanks for joining me for another bourbon review, everybody. And today we are going to be discussing one of my most anticipated releases of the year, the Wild Turkey Voyage. So, this is the Master's Keep release for 2023. It is a 10-year bourbon that was finished in Jamaican rum casks. And man, this particular pour has taken me for a voyage as well. I started recording a video on this one, and the video and my thought process and my prior notes and everything weren't aligning. I had to go back to the drawing board and let's talk about what I've discovered since then. And man, this thing has changed since it went past the neck, but I'll discuss that as well. So thank you for joining me today, whiskey friends. Let's kick off the show. All right. Just going to give it the fancy glass treatment here. So for this one, let's go through the stats a little bit. So yes, once again, this is the Wild Turkey Voyage. It was finished in rum casks. It is a 10-year bourbon and it is 106 proof. Now, the thing that is controversial about this particular release is the fact that Wild Turkey has raised the price from $175 to essentially $275. So MSRP has gone up $100. And it does put it into a difficult position. Does it hit at that level or not when you are escalating the price to that degree? So we're going to discuss that, especially as we get into the final score. And before we get into it, special shout out to a special whiskey friend who helped me get my hands on this bottle. I really appreciate it. He knew I was looking out for it and reached out to me. Gosh, maybe 6 weeks, 2 months after I told him I was had my eye on it. Reached out, let me know that he had his hands on it, and wanted to know if I was still interested. So thank you very much for letting me explore this whiskey and doing this particular review. Now, as I was saying on the top of the video here, I actually recorded a review for this. And when I do these reviews, I have my scores in advance, but then I do a live tasting with you before we go in the scores. And most of the time, I mean, you can see here, before I score a whiskey, I sit down with it 3 or 4 times. I mean, I really try to get to know it. Just because I know things can change, I know my own palate can change. Sometimes I can be in a weird mood. And quite frankly, the video was about this being maybe my disappointment of the year. Now, I won't say it's not a disappointment, mainly because of that price. But as I was going through the review and going through the flavors and thinking about my scores, I was like, no, this doesn't align. Like something's changed about this pour. Either I've changed or the pour has opened up in the last week since I've tried it and done those official scores to recording these videos. So something changed in the middle there. And I had to call an audible. I canceled the video. I stopped everything. I went back to my notes and I just re-explored it from a fresh from a fresh point of view. So what you're going to get here is my updated point of view and what I'm going to talk about in this video, which is ultimately going to be a very delicious pour, quite frankly. But is it $275 delicious? We're stretching it. But let's get into the nose, let's get into the palate, and then we'll get into the scores. Thank you for joining me this far, everybody. Now, the thing that has been a constant through line in every tasting with this whiskey so far is that the nose is hands down the best part of this pour. It is a near perfect nose. I gave it nines to all the nose categories. And the reason for that is I mean, it's just so inviting. The flavors are just near perfect of what I just want to explore all day. Like I could just pour this and explore the nose all day. That is how good the nose is. So this is probably where the bourbon and the rum play against each other the best. They both have equal voice in the nose And there's other parts of the experience where the rum does start to take over, maybe even in some good ways. But on the nose, it starts out with some fruits, some glazed strawberry and some mango. So it does have these tropical flavors that I would attribute to the rum, and it leans mango. And that's not something I've ever said about a wild turkey before. But then when I say those bourbon flavors are there as well, there's a salted caramel playing with a freshly baked soft pretzel with a chocolate drizzle on it. So that's pretty darn delicious. There is a bit of almond butter that comes out as well. So maybe with that soft pretzel, you've got a range of different dips that you're going into, some almond butter, some salted caramel. And then on the side, I think the rum is doing this. It has to be doing this. There is this over the top bright sweetness that I essentially equate to a clear rock candy. So the rock candy itself wouldn't be flavored in any way. It's that clear, glassy, almost see-through rock candy that's supposed to be more of that neutral flavor, just the sugars. And then the last thing that I'll highlight, it does have that turkey funk to it. It's essentially the equivalence of maybe some dirt on a rick house floor, which maybe doesn't sound like a very appetizing flavor, but it is quite comforting and it makes me smile. So that's enough talking about this delicious nose, but the nose is the best part. Let's get into the taste. Hmm. So it's 106 proof. The mouthfeel is so rich, oily, and decadent. Really does coat at everything. It's one of those bourbons that can even start running across the sides of your tongue when the oils start running through. Oh, I love that sensation. That rock candy sweetness does come through initially, and it's accompanied by a lot of spices. So, cinnamon that can even drift into a clove, a whole bunch of baking spices, and then it starts hinting at what's going to pop on mid palate. The cherry starts hinting at itself. There's some chocolate there. So, it starts hinting at what the experience has later. Let's get into mid palate. By mid palate, you can tell that the rum and the bourbon are starting to fight each other a little bit. It does try to brighten up beyond the 10-year wild turkey profile that you would expect. And, it does have a whole lot of vanilla that actually begins to take over. But then that vanilla is accompanied by cherry. So you get this cherry with the cream, almost like it's a cherry cordial, but without the chocolate over it, just the inside of that. And then that bourbon is just trying to fight through. And it doesn't come through until the finish. So there is this point here where it goes through a transition where essentially mid palate, it's the rum that's winning. And then right before the finish, the bourbon starts coming through. So you start getting those dark flavors. The oak comes through, there's a chocolate, but then it starts brightening up again. Then it turns into the almond paste. The rock candy comes through again. That Rick House funk is fighting its way through. But ultimately, by the end of it, you are left with the rum. So that's kind of the weird thing about this experience. Everything I'm describing is actually pretty delightful, but maybe it just doesn't mesh right, or it doesn't mesh like I would expect to. It almost feels like it's fighting itself rather than being something that's working harmoniously. It's the cherry, though. It's the cherry that's really taken over this particular tasting that I wasn't getting such a delicious cherry note on prior tastings, and that's what curbed me and made me just start this whole process over again to give it this fresh take that I'm giving you now. So let's get into the scores now, knowing that I'm giving it a fresh take. So you can only imagine what I was thinking about it before as I flash these things up. But we are talking about a $275 pour. So that's the most important thing to kind of highlight in all of this. So on the channel, we do break things down into a whole lot of metrics. Ultimately, it can be summarized into a flavor score, experience score, and a value score. And where I left off on the flavors was, yeah, it's good. It's very good. It has a whole lot of good qualities to it, particularly when it comes to the nose. And the experience is good too. That nose has a lot of depth to it. It's nice and viscous. There's depth to the flavors. Even the finish has won me around a little bit, but it's still not anything that's over the top in terms of getting any like nines when it comes to anything on the taste itself. It's mostly getting eights across the board. So that's why you end up with a flavor score around an 82 and a half, an experience score an 82. But then when you think about something scoring 82 on flavor, 82 on experience that costs $275, it's too much for the experience that it offers. Even at $175, I'd probably be giving it an 8 on value rather than a 6, but it's losing a lot of points on value, which is ultimately bringing it down to an 80. But even if, let's just say, throw it out, it was $100, even if I gave it all the points on the value, it would still only top out as an 84. So it's not hitting my top 10 of the year based on the flavors or anything like that, which ultimately then kind of makes it disappointing still in that regard. So who would I recommend this to? If you're going to get into the Master Keep series, I don't think this is the one to start with. I mean, if you get lucky, I guess it's good, but just kind of having context that if I were to put the 8 Master Keeps that I have and I were to rank them all, this is probably bottom 3. So that's the most disappointing part. In the year that it's in my mind, one of the lesser ranking Master Keeps, that's the year they decided to drastically escalate the price. And I don't know, it's one of those things where it's like, I've been a completist with this series for so many years. Should I continue to be a completist? I don't know. It's rocking me a little bit. When it comes to this particular one, will I buy a backup? No. This will be a one and done when it comes to this particular pour. And really, there's only a few of the Master Keeps that I would have backed up, though I don't have any backups of any of them. So that's where I am on the Wild Turkey Voyage. It has been a voyage for me. As you can tell, I had it ranked much lower prior to my reevaluation of it. Maybe this is just one that needs time to open up in the bottle. I mean, the week difference between this week and last week. And even, I mean, I went through 4 different tastings on it before I went to this video. It drastically changed. I'm really, really glad that cherry note is really, really shining through. Some of the Wild Turkey bourbon is starting to shine through, even though I still think it's fighting the rum and it's not working in that harmonious fashion. It is a good pour. It's just not $275 good. All right, one last sip and let's sign off. Man, that cherry's really coming through. So those are my thoughts on the Wild Turkey Voyage. Let me know what you think in the comments if you've had a chance to try this before and where you rank it amongst the Master Keep line if you've tried multiple Master Keeps. So thank you for joining me today, whiskey friends. I'll catch you on the next whiskey review. Goodbye, everybody.